Starts recording. Cool. So start off as usual. Go into my test folder. Mine's called test 2. Here's the test. And then code dot to open up my current folder. Cool. I was playing around with some stuff, so I'll get rid of that. I was playing with some code the AI gave me, so I'll get rid of that. I recommend that as well. If you guys are using the AI at all, you can run some of their stuff in other files here, which is fun. Cool. So we'll start off brief review of day 3. We learned about objects, and then we kept doing the same thing that we are doing with them. Objects are just a bunch of key value pairs that are stuck together in one place. So instead of saying something is a string, something is a object, and it can have, a from, which is a string, channel, which is a string, the amount of kicks, which is a number, and then you guys looped over those and changed properties on them. You logged out properties on them, and reused a lot of like the array stuff as well, like pushing that object to an array or putting it in the array like this. And when you declare the array, so that you can, have a central list of stuff like Discord messages. So today we're just going to, it's only a small lesson today because this is confusing stuff and it really is the basics of all the more complicated stuff we'll do after. So we're only going to add a slight thing today. So we have something like my Discord message. Kind of like what we did yesterday. Actually, I'm not an admin because Nilo is. So this is kind of, it's good for a message, but like really this is admin property, like that's not part of the message, right? That's part of like the horsey. That's not something that belongs on every message. And it would be really weird to keep track of every message if you added something like that. Same with like, the user's roles. If I wanted to say this is property is an array. Sorry, if I wanted to say like this guy's a crane manager like this as a string. I can't keep track of all of the roles in just a string. And I also can't keep track of them on the message. They don't belong there. A better message. What if I have, say, a const user first, and let's say it's diply. So his name is diply, and isAdmin false. So now I've got an object that represents diply. His name is diply. The isAdmin is false. He's not an admin, and I can add other stuff. This kind of stuff. Sorry, this is a better message creation strategy. We start off with a user. Let's create a user named diply. Above, we can see that this is stuff that belongs on a user model. We use the term model to refer to the type of object we are using. Because it's kind of weird if you call everything an object, say you're going to have a conversation with someone and be like working on code together. And you'd say like, oh, the user object, the diply object has this property. It's a little bit easier to say like diply is a user object. It's a user model. And we can expect certain things to be on each of those models. You don't create models. Models are just objects. It's just a way to think about them. Diply is a user. Diply is a user model. We want all user models to have names, isAdmin, and isYellow. So now, knowing that, I can say const Neil is I need a name. I need isAdmin. Fine, we'll give it to him. He's true. Now, when we think about objects, it kind of helps to think about this user model thing. These are types of users, right? Because we want them to represent something. Objects always represent something. I hope we learned that in the last Discord message thing. You don't really have these arbitrary objects. You have them representing something. And the entire day 3 was about representing those as Discord messages. So now we have something that's like, this is a Discord user. But how do we associate a user to a message? This is how we associate a user with a message. We have two model types, users and messages. Users should have name, isAdmin, isYellow. Messages should have name, user, kex, and text. Let's define those as our properties. So we can say all users look like this. We open up a curly bracket. This is just comments to ourselves, right? Name, string, isAdmin, it's going to be a boolean, and isYellow is a boolean, right? If we want to make a user object, have something represent a user, we should have these three things because with that, we're going to rely on them. So we want to say all users have those same things. In that same way, we can say the messages we work with have with look like this. I think they should have a text, which is a string. They should have kex, which is a number. I did that yesterday. They should have user, which is of type user. So we can use an object as a property on another object. So I can say const my message, let's say const diplys message is equal to the text. Why aren't I yellow? Also, I hate Tums. And he gets kex. He got 100 kex for that one because everyone hates Tums. And then who sent it? Before, what we did was this. We gave him a name. Now, let's say the user is equal to diply. In that same way, we can say const Neil's message is text. Shut up about being yellow. Gonna talk back to diply. Kex 0. He doesn't really, unless he's cranking on a meme, he doesn't get much. And the user is Neil. So we have an object as a property on another object. And we've defined these kind of models, these contracts that we want them to bind to. Because it would be very annoying if, say, every object, every user object, every user model had different properties. Like if I called this username and this one login handle, right? It would be very difficult for me to use these properties. I would have to guess or check multiple properties when I'm trying to say log out their name, right? Say I really quickly just want to say log out their names generically. Or if I make a function like this, log user name, and I take a user and I say console.log user.name. Because I can pass in anything as this user, right? I can say, okay, I want to log username, and I pass in diply. But this isn't going to work because he doesn't have a .name property anymore. I called it .username. And if I pass in Neil, it's also not going to work because within the context of this function, we're trying to use .name. And here Neil has a .login handle. They need to have both the same. And now this function can deal with any user, right? Doesn't matter if it's Diply or Neil. Anything that has a name property, this thing can log it out. So we say this function accepts an argument of type user model. We can rely on the .name property then. We can think of the user argument as being bound to the contract of a user model. And later, we will get into actually defining custom types so that we say this has to have a name. Right now, we're just coding, we're agreeing it does because it makes sense. Yeah, this is an object with type name. This is an object of type name. But if I wanted to, and I'm a bad programmer, I could do this. Now we have an object with a property of name and an object with a property of username. And this function only works for Diply. It doesn't work for Neil. So there are ways to make them actually bound to that contract. And we'll get into it later. But it's actually easier to do it this way in your brain. Or sorry, harder to do it this way in your brain, which is better because it forces you to think about it when you're creating the objects. What kind of object am I creating here? Day 3, we just created objects, but without knowing it. If we click the day 3 here, without knowing it, we created them of type message, right? That implicit type that's in our brain. That we need a from and a channel and kex and text and stuff like this. That's like a bound contract that we want messages to adhere to so that they can work. And when you logged out the .from, the .text, the .kex and stuff like that, we were already relying on that contract. So now we have 2 types. So what if I want to log out the user of a message? If I go down here, Neil's message is sent from Neil. I create a function that can do something like log username from message. Now I'll take a type message. Log username from message takes a single argument of a message model object and logs out the user's name who posted the message. So we already know that if we had a user, we could do user.name, right? Maybe I'll grab Diply and I'll paste them down here so we can see the difference. And I'll just get rid of them. I'll comment that out for now. So we've got Diply here with a .name property. He's a user model. So we're going to guarantee he has a .name. And then on the message, as the user property, we say it was Diply. Diply did it because that's what we named the variable up here. It's mapping to the name of the variable, not the string I put here. Because Diply changes his name all the fucking time. Right now, he's was Diply. And it would be very annoying if we had to go update code everywhere to refer to that without being dynamic about it. So the name of the object refers to the name of the user object that you named it. The user is Diply, and here's the user's Neil. So we know if we were just had a user in here, we could log out the user.name. But we have the message. And we know message has a user property. And we access properties with dot. If I say console.log, I know I'm in there because I want to log something out. Okay. I say I've got a message. So I've got message. I'll start typing that. What property do I want to log out on the message? Well, I think the user, if I hover over it here, it even says the user property has a name property on it. So, and I know that's Diply. So message.user, because I want to access the user property on a message. And then now that I've got the user, I want to do .name. And I can log username from message. Diply's message. That's what I'll pass in. So, oh, this guy's Neil. Sorry. I wrote Diply again. That's Neil. So I run this again. I say, okay, so the first time when I log the username on that user in my function up here, I'm logging out just the user.name. And when I call the function, I actually pass in Neil. And we can see Neil is an object, the property of name, value of Neil. So when I log out user.name, I get Neil. So when I go down to my new function I just wrote, you see I've got a diplys message here. I have a user. So message.user. And the value is diply. So if I go look at what diply is, he has a name, and it's was diply. So when I log out message.user.name, I get was diply. So this is really handy now, because now we could even do something like this. Actually, we can say this. Okay, so I want a user to post a message. I want to make a nice reusable function that I can use always when a user posts a message. It is annoying to constantly create variables for this, like diply message and Neil's message above. So when a user posts something, they post it with text. This function should take an existing user, like diply or Neil, and it should take the text of the message they want to send. And it should create a new message in the function associated with that user. So my function post message takes a user and the text. So I know how to make a message. I can say const message is equal to text, because we're passing in the text. So whatever text you pass into this function, we create a message with that type of text. The other thing a message has is kex, but we just posted this, so it has 0, right? Heart some comments here. The message text is whatever the person passed into this function. The kex are 0. This message is brand new. They just posted it. Unless I posted it, in which case, you know, it comes with... The kex come pretty quick. People are going to be calling the add kex function pretty quickly after this is made. You may as well add them together if it's horsey. And then you got down here, we need to associate the message with a user. And we know we passed in the user. So we can see what that looks like when I call it. Create a new object with the text passed in and whoever did it, the user, which is a type user model. So we know we want to associate, just like when I did user Neil up here, user diply, that's who did it. We're just creating a reusable function because it's really annoying to just do it manually all the time. Why can't we, knowing what we know, just create a function that can do this for us, right? So if I call post message, say diply is saying, help, I'm stuck in a function. Something diply would say. Classic diply. So if I log it out, I get my object. Help, I'm stuck in a function with 0 kex, and it's associated with the user. And you can see it all logged out here. The user, who is another object because of the curly brace, has a name, isAdmin, and false, isYellow. Now with this reusable function, I can make diply say tons of stuff, right? Now I've got 2 messages, and it's so easy. Like now with just calling that same function again and passing in just the different text, we're posting messages as diply. And if I want to post a message as Neil, say something grumpy about my wife. Now Neil said that. We got another message. Text, kex, and then the user, which is Neil. We've associated them. Now up here, I have this function log username from message. And if you see the logs from that, we're only logging out the message.user.name, the nested object. We see up here, Neil and was Dipley. And here we are logging out the entire message that we create inline. We can call it as many times as we want. Every time it'll create a new message because it's function scoped, right? We got the curly brace here saying this is in the function. So even though this is a const, it finishes running one time and then it's done. And then when you call it again, it runs again, just like a for loop. So this message can be redeclared basically every time you call the function. You can add other properties if you want, which might be part of the homework. But I know this is already a lot. So the homework is going to be kind of creating a couple reusable functions and doing checks. I could even have, to show you the power of these reusable functions, right? We did kind of an edit message function yesterday. It looked like this. This should look kind of familiar. Make it clear, I'll call it new text like most of you guys did. So we say, we can edit a message by taking a message and changing its text. Message.text is equal to new text. The interesting thing about something like this is any user can edit this, right? What if this function that we wrote yesterday took a user as well? User, I'll call it this user trying to edit to call them different. So we know who's trying to edit. And when we call it, it'll look like this. We're trying to edit, let's say, what did I call up here? Neil's message. We have that one up there. Neil sent this. So we want to edit Neil's message, but Dipley is the user trying to edit it. And Dipley's trying to say, I love Dipley. Dipley wants Neil's message to say, I love Dipley. So we console.log the message in here. We can see the result of that. You can see that Neil now said, I love Dipley. All right, he changed the message on him down here. And he even spelled love wrong. What a loser. So what if, because I have the user trying to edit, these reusable functions, that's kind of the idea I'm trying to get you through your head. Reusable functions and these reliable object properties that we're using. What if I say something like, if the user trying to edit does not equal the message.user, throw an error. You cannot edit another user's message. We'll go over that stuff in just one sec. Boom. Now when I run it at the bottom, I get an error. You cannot edit another user's message. You might have seen a lot of these errors happen when you're running code by yourself. This is what they look like in code. You throw an error. And that's kind of, you've seen them happen by accident before, and that's underlying stuff happening. This is what it looks like. Focus a little bit less on the throw error line right now. That's not really why I'm trying to demonstrate this. This is the line I want to demonstrate. If the user trying to edit is not the message.user, then you can't. Then you cannot get to this part. So this is obviously a good idea for a reusable function because there's all these safeguards and defensive shit you want to do when creating an app like Discord. Imagine if you had to rewrite that logic constantly to compare these users to make sure nobody can edit anyone else's things. What if you have to compare roles and user have roles and you need to make sure that, you can edit this guy if you're a crane manager, but you can't if that, then you access the user.roles property and blah, blah, blah. Really nice to have it all in one spot in the edit message function. Really nice to do that once. And then whenever you want to edit something, you call this. So I'm going to kind of reiterate from the top what we did today, what we learned today. Objects should adhere to contracts that we call models. It's a contract between the code and you. I want the model to look the same. The messages we made yesterday, you were already doing this. That's the most important takeaway. You were already doing this because you had functions that logged stuff out on an object, and you relied on the properties on those objects because you logged out their .name or .from or .kex or the text. And if you called those properties different on every message you created, your code would not run. So you already did this by completing the other day's homework. This is just a better way to think about it, because now we also have user models that look like name, isAdmin, and isYellow, like this. And where's diply? And like this. Identical objects, different values. That's a model. Identical objects, different values. They should all have a name, but their names can be different. But that's what makes them a user. In a traditional app, you'll have hundreds of models, right? Representing different things. Users, posts, roles, permissions, channels, organizations. All of these things in Discord are going to be different models, different objects. And being able to associate them is a really powerful thing. Being able to say that Diply posted this, or Neil posted this one, just by calling it the user property. And why do we call it the user property? Because if I called it the Diply property on Diply's message and the Neil property on Neil's message, this wouldn't work, my function to log the username from any message, because there is no property called user anymore. It's called Diply. It's too specific. We need a more generic contract, so we call it user. But the value is Diply. Now the value is Neil. When we start writing reliable code like that, we can write functions that do fun things. And we can know that they'll run, which is probably the foundation of all programming, is just saying, I can write a bunch of code and it'll run. And getting that context of an object should adhere to a contract is really important. It's probably one of the most important things in programming, I think. And it's something that you'll do the entire time, and it's never going away. And you'll do it on the front end when making websites, and the back end when making servers, and when making games and Discord bots. Everything you make will involve this concept. It's one of the ones you cannot really go over enough at the beginning, that these objects are not just random things. They can be, but that's not reliable, good coding. And we need our objects to be associated with each other. And you might have very, very deeply nested one. User.roles.permissions. If each role has permissions, just like Discord, then that'll be associated with the user. Permissions to roles to users, all the way back. And if you make a game, I think it would be really handy to have all of your items adhere to an item contract. And those items can be associated with characters. Because it would be really weird if you were trying to make a game and you wanted to display the username on the World of Warcraft login screen. And every single object, every character contract that you're trying to log in has a different property for the name, has a different value of it. But if they don't, and they all have the same property, you can make a function that just logs out and displays it on the page. And you can say, this is my World of Warcraft character's name, because I can rely on that property being the same. Almost everything can be modeled like this. That's why we call them user models, because you're modeling real world things after them, right? If I wanted to make a car object, I'd say, okay, I want to model an object after a car. I think it should look like this. A little object thing and model out. Oh, I think it has a color, which is a string. Red, etc. Could even be a hex code. RGBA value. You know, I think it has number of doors, which is a number. I think it has airbag, boolean, right? When you go browse a website like Craigslist or something that has a thing on the side of the screen and it says, oh, we've got filters here, right? You're just literally clicking through a model, an object that they've modeled carefully. They know that when you click view cars on Craigslist, everything on that page should be a car. Because it'd be very weird if they had the same object on every page. Like imagine you're viewing apartments and you can filter by number of doors on the car or has airbag, whether the house has an airbag or not that you're looking at. The filters wouldn't make any sense. When you go view an NFT collection like the pandas, they have an object representing the metadata. You know, we have a hat. We have a shirt. I'm sure we have other attributes. I forgot by now. I hate the fucking pandas. But Magic Eden will make a different object that represents every single type of NFT, basically. That's why they have to index them. They can't list them automatically. They need you to tell them. You literally provide a form and they create a model in code based on that. And I say, listen, this is the pandas. You need to represent it in code as an object that has shirts, hats, backgrounds, name, number, title, all that kind of shit. And current owner. Current owner is a string property on that object. But it'd be very weird if you click to Burbs and then Burbs had all the same filters from that same object. Well, they asked Neil what it looked like. What does your object look like? What are your possible filters? Neil might remember uploading that kind of information when he was making Burbs, but he never saw it get turned into code. He just had a big file and he sent it to them and they did it. But that's what it did behind the scenes was they started modeling it. They modeled it into an object. They literally did this. So this is like the foundation. I really can't drive home how important this stuff is to focus, practice on, and make yourself comfortable as you can be with at this point. Because once you can do this and you can organize your code like this, and I know some of you might be thinking, I can barely write code from memory right now. What am I supposed to do this? You're doing both simultaneously. You guys are already so far ahead of where you were when you started. And if we get the hold of this within the next week or so, being comfortable with objects, being comfortable with functions, being comfortable with arrays, we will be able to code almost anything as our projects. A lot of people teach making a simple website first. I think it's more important to get this foundation down because if you can model this, you guys will be able to make the projects that are fun to you. Like this Discord is a little bit of a real world one where we've modeled it after that. But, you know, within 2 weeks or so, we are going to be making a Discord bot as part of this. And you guys will be able to model the messages you want it to take and what the output should look like as a model as well, to model those objects. And it will be very easy to do compared to learning all that stuff on the fly. So the homework is going to be largely around this. Probably for the next couple days. There's going to be no lecture tomorrow. 2 days of homework, and then something around this. Anyone have any questions? Concerns? Thoughts? Not a goddamn thing, eh?
I'm excited. I want to get going, see if I can figure it out this fucking time.
Fuck yeah. That's what I like to hear. Does it make sense? Like kind of that what you did yesterday and explaining it with the actual concept today, like what you did. Like yesterday you made you modeled a Discord message. And now we can do that with other types, with users and other things we want to represent.
And this definitely clicks.
Cool. Okay, I will write out homework and fucking get the video uploaded then. Where's my old big boat?